Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of the 10-8 Fightcast. It's been a long time coming, a long project building this little corner of the world for ourselves here.
Many moons have passed.
Many Amazon boxes.
Many Amazon boxes have come and go.
There's been a lot of equipment. Some of it will have to go back. We'll have to order some more stuff. Not everything's working.
Have some weaponized
spring-loaded microphone arms.
We can keep those for a jackass type thing, I think. Yeah,
but we'll see.
Those are dangerous.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Dylan McGrath. I'm a professional MMA commentator and analyst. The man to my right is Trevor Hayes, who is a coach, a coach of fighters, a commentator and analyst in his own right.
Professional at a few things.
Professional at many things.
I say otherwise. I am a professional dude.
And we are two guys that like to talk about fights. So that's what our podcast is mostly going to be about. We're going to be talking about the UFC. We're going to be talking about local events here in North Carolina, South Carolina.
Yeah, we both have a big place in our hearts for the grassroots fight scene. So you'll definitely hear us talking about the big fights everyone knows about and a lot of the fights that people don't know about, and potentially some guests of the local cats to let them know hey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also their insight and their experience with the fight scene to give their insight for upcoming fight cards.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that in the future there definitely will be guests. The main kind of dealio with the show will be just me and Trevor mostly breaking down cards or talking about cards that just happened. So plan on having a new episode for you guys every week or every 2 weeks at the most. And let's just get started. Today we're talking about UFC 271, which is taking place this weekend. Israel Adesanya taking on Robert Whittaker for the second time. And we're just going to go from the bottom up and talk about, the fights that interest us and what sticks out. And I know the first thing that we talked about was Mike Matheta, or Mike Matheta, the Blood Diamond, as they call him.
That Izzy, the coaching staff, they all just call the guy Blood Diamond.
Right.
And I'm okay, that's legit.
3-0 in MMA, making his UFC debut.
Which that raises some eyebrows.
Correct.
And then you go, let's look at the fact that he's had over 100 Muay Thai fights.
Yes. Yeah.
He has one professional loss in glory, but other than that, he has over 100 Muay Thai fights. And I tell people, when you hear people say there's high-level striking in MMA, you'll hear that from people, but that's really just good fundamentals out of a jiu-jitsu guy. And some people call it high-level striking.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's guys like this. This is a boogeyman. To me,
on the feet.
Could this guy
on
be
the
taken
feet.
down and subbed? Absolutely. But I tell people, if you're just an MMA striker, don't.
Well, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's no mystery. It's no mystery how you can beat this guy.
But if it's your first time running into Jeremiah Wells, he's a thick boy welterweight. He
extensive fight record for the MMA.
He compared to this guy's MMA record, but I wonder if this guy's going to start feeling out the guy on the feet, because it's patterns on the feet that you can't always pick up on. High level strikers move differently than just high level MMA fighters.
We'll certainly be talking a lot about that later when we talk about Israel.
Excited. Yeah.
I think the thing about
just me, I love seeing these high level strikers come to MMA with a striking for MMA game plan instead of a hope I don't get taken down, where they know how to use the proper ring and cage control, like in the middle by the cage, how to stay long by the wall to strike, create spaces to exit out. You're seeing a lot of crafty footwork from these strikers, where it's the more basic your wrestling jiu-jitsu is, the better your striking gets. Some of these strikers were spending too much time becoming wrestlers or jiu-jitsu guys. And that guy's fuck, I'm just going to use ring control.
Do you
and it's slick.
Do you like Jack Slack?
I love Jack.
Okay, so Jack Slack talks a lot about the 4 stages of a fight.
Yes.
Or fights taking place in stages. And I think that the city kickboxing guys, what they've done, especially with Israel, I think they're some of the best guys at that first stage of fighting. Mm-hmm. So I think that, if you go out there and feel out Blood Diamond on the feet, he's probably not just going to swing for the fences and try to knock you out. He's going to entertain that because he's scanning you.
He's so high level that he's getting feedback from
feedback.
You're trying to feel him out, and he won't have to do anything to know what you want to do.
Exactly. Israel is so good at that as well.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of guys can stay ahead of a takedown angle and stuff like that, and they can just, there's so much input they have in that striking range that these people are trying to go, let me get inside and read. This guy's going, oh, I know your range better than you right now, thank you. And you start walking into shots you don't see, and they've really closed the gap on that. And controlling that space with feints as well.
Yeah.
Man, when people start showing what they have to offer outside, then feinting, it's not fun.
I mean, if you're looking to find a way to get people to pay for ESPN Plus or Fight Pass to tune into the early prelims, putting a guy like this on your first fight is a pretty good way to do it. But it's also safe for the UFC, right? Like, if you put him there and he gets taken down and subbed in 30 seconds, it's no big deal. It's the first fight on the early prelims. But if he knocks the guy out, now you have a reason for people to tune in.
This is something that people talk about on like SportsCenter the next day. It's
exactly.
Like these kind of this is the highlight they want, where it's like, oh, teammate of
Israel Adesanya, head kick, knockout.
If this guy gets a viral knockout, like, you see him climbing the rankings quick.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of the rankings, we were talking a lot about Alexander Hernandez and Renato Moicano taking each other on the early prelims.
Yeah, and he is salty about it. That's what I've heard. There's a lot. He does not. He feels disrespected. He's being
outspoken about it for sure, but he's always been like a very outspoken guy, even really before he got to the UFC. But when he got to the UFC, short notice replacement, fought Beneil Dariush, knocked him out in the first round, and kind of exploded onto the scene. And it's also one of those things where it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because you immediately kind of get to the top of the heap, but if you're a guy like Alex Hernandez, you might not have been ready to be at that level yet.
He's one of those guys that definitely looked at the kind of athlete where he was really good at high school sports and probably like some college sports, so he was very used to being good at stuff.
Right.
So him coming to the UFC and knocking this guy out, he probably just jumped into that like super mindset of like, oh, it's because I'm this good. And I can imagine like there is a victory can really mess up a person's career. Like victory is like, so like, hey, if he had lost to Beneil, he'd probably be a better fighter. He'd probably be higher on the card than he is now, and he might not have had. He might just have one loss. He might have like a 16-1 record.
He was, I mean,
instead of a 13-4, because like you said, like he tried to chomp the bit at Donald, and Donald just
got exposed.
But that was that. But that was him really thinking that he was better than he was.
Yeah.
And fighting is not the sport where you have to know, like, you have options, they have options.
Well, at that level, once you get up to that, like, top 7, top 8, top 10.
He made easy work of his competition outside the UFC.
Of course. Yeah, he had a very smooth run to the UFC. He looked great in his, and that's why they called him in to fight Beneil on short notice, because they were like, this is a guy who will put on a good fight. But lightweight's like the hardest division in the world in terms of like how much people are like competing in it, and
the path to the title
is messy, littered with corpses. Yeah, and Donald is the kind of fighter who, if they're like, obviously he's on the decline now, and he could probably get beaten by a guy like Alex Hernandez today. But this was just 3-4 years ago. If there's a technical weakness in your game on the feet, Donald Cerrone is going to expose it. He's going to expose it. And he kind of, the same way he exposed Rick Story on the feet is kind of how he picked apart Hernandez.
It was very identical.
Yeah, it was kind of methodical, like a methodical beatdown until there was just nothing he could do.
Rick Story and Alexander Hernandez had to have a very parallel like story of like their run-ins to Cowboy.
Right.
And man, Rick Story did not bounce back well.
No, but I mean, that's
Hernandez is trying to bounce back.
It's one of the most viral clips in MMA history is that combo that Cowboy finished Rick Story with. I mean, I think so many people still to this day just watch that before they go spar in the morning. It looks like Tekken,
And I'm kind of like, man, you learned that in your beginner's class.
The main event of the early prelim card is Mana Martinez taking on Ronnie Lawrence. I think that's a great fight to have on your early prelims because
just blew right over Hanato.
Yes, Hanato. We forgot to talk about Hanato. Like, Hanato's moving up. Hanato's coming up to lightweight.
So was he ever a bantamweight?
He was never
a bantamweight.
Yeah, I think you were conflating him with Thomas Almeida.
But
Hanato was kind of on that rise towards the title, but then he got beat by Brian Ortega, and then he got knocked out viciously by Korean Zombie in Greenville, South Carolina. I was there live. That was actually the night I met Michael Bisping. I'll just never forget how people were so excited to see Korean Zombie. Like, even in a place like South Carolina, when the music comes on, people are just so hyped to see KZ.
And I remember seeing the Korean Zombie hype train start with like that first WEC pay-per-view, I think. That Slugfest.
Kind of put him on the map.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I can't remember his opponent either. But
He had a rematch and he hit him with a
Hanato is he's just I think run his course at 45, and it's obviously been hard on him. So it's going to be interesting to see how he looks at 155 because this is not an easy guy.
So this is his 55 debut.
I think so. I looked at his record. I believe
it's rough lightweight
to debut, and he's a big boy too. Yeah. It's not like he's a small lightweight.
Like it shows like Hanato just has a bit more experience with
right.
fights, but really like that is not an easy introduction. Like I feel like. Because Hernandez looks like a welcome.
Well, don't you think that happens a little too much anyway? Like the guys move up in weight, and just because they were moderately successful at their weight class, they feel like they have to take the highest ranked fight possible. You know, I feel like that just happens way too much. There's
also just some ego behind it.
Yes.
Where I'm one of those people where I'm like, no, let's not take a monster in that division. If you're going up a weight class, it's like let's find someone that's an even fight on paper.
Right.
Like, here's the thing, and it's an even fight going up a weight class. If like. That person's record might not be as good as yours. Like, let's say Moicano, who's 15-4, fights someone who might be. Let's say they find a 15-7 guy. If you found a 15-7 lightweight, that's a very even matchup. Something like that, you know, where it's like that guy just knows how to fight at bigger weights, and his advantage is size. And Moicano, that's how you want to build Moicano up because you find out can he beat that guy. No.
Well, look what just happened to Cody Garbrandt. You know, he bit off way too big of a piece.
Yeah,
I mean, taking first of all cutting that much weight and taking 8 months to get to your fighting weight, and then you are fighting one of the best flyweights in the world in a title eliminator.
You're no longer in the top 10 in that weight class. So you fight someone outside the top 10.
Exactly.
Icaro France was the worst idea to fight.
A banger. A 25. Well, I think he just wanted to go out there against somebody who would like actually stand with him because all of his success comes from when people just fly with him, you know?
Yeah.
Like all of his success has come from that, except for the Dominic fight.
And all Aussies are welcoming a brawl.
Yeah, that too.
Americans think they know how to brawl until they brawl with an Aussie, and it's a different story.
Yeah, the main event on that prelim card is two prospects, two guys who pretty much are newer to the UFC. I think one of them has one UFC fight, and the other is 2 UFC fights in, but both have won in the UFC. So, I mean, I think that the reason they're putting them on after Hernandez and Hanato is they're kind of hoping that you tune in for Hernandez and you know Blood Diamond as well, and then you can kind of get exposed to one of these guys because I know Mana Martinez has a little bit of hype behind him at the 135.
These are good fights to have on like at just the start when you're getting like the snacks ready.
Get the snacks, get the beers.
Yeah, you're winding down. People aren't over yet, but these are good fights to like definitely like these are the fights that people got to watch because there's a lot of finishes on these undercards now.
Yeah.
Like, these are the fights that show the replays, like, throughout the event. So these are always
I think the matchmaking is leaning in that direction, too. Like, we were talking about how we talked last time you and I watched a UFC card with Ngannou taking on Cyril. We were talking about how a lot of people didn't think the card was very good on paper going into the event, but it was a good card delivered, yeah. So
would you say that Mana and Ronnie, like, the winner of this is, like, knocking on a top 15 after that?
I would think so. It's bantamweight's not a
hype pun, but just like that. How filled up is it right now?
I mean,
not like lightweight.
At the top, it's choked out, but for top 15, yeah, I think that either one of these guys
could just do like
potentially compete there.
Like a lightweight Thunderdome, like 2 weeks in a row.
I honestly think that's one thing the UFC has never capitalized on is doing a tournament.
They've done some like heavyweight only fight night cards, but
I mean like I want a Grand Prix, you know, like I want a Grand Prix that takes place over several months, if not a year. I think that would have been the best thing to do when Khabib left, because anytime a division is left that destroyed, like he decimated everybody at 155 and then rode off into the sunset. Anytime everybody has been beaten by the same guy, you don't just set up the last 2 guys that he beat and have them fight each other. I mean, you do that because that's what the UFC's always done. But I think it would be cool to have just like a complete Grand Prix.
Like when
exactly.
Bellator does it, I love it. When they do it in Japan, I love seeing it.
I love the Grand Prix. Fuck the interim championship.
I love the tournaments. I love the 2 5-minute rounds in one night. And
right.
seeing guys fight through. Is it old school? Yeah, and that's awesome. That is also. But I think people like, hey, that's how you become the best.
I do think that they could do a tournament like that without disrupting the format. Like they could just have, you know, the qualifiers be, you know, a certain fight night, or you could spread it out over several fight nights in 1 month or during International Fight Week even.
That's what Bellator does.
Right. Bellator does this pretty well. It's okay.
Strikeforce was the last one to really... I mean, Invicta still does it.
Yes, yes.
Strikeforce had done it, and that's how we got like Daniel Cormier into the UFC.
That's that's the best tournament run of all time. That's the best tournament run.
He kind of
came in
out and then...
Came in as an alternate, scooped Josh Barnett on his head. I mean, that was when the world kind of really got exposed to Daniel Cormier for the first time, and he was certainly next level even back then. I think a lot of people knew, but yeah, I think they could do a tournament like that without disrupting the format too much. I mean, I hope one day the UFC kind of, now that they're not owned by 3 people and they're owned by like a company that seems to like have creative ideas.
I think there's going to be at least like 10 or 15 people in that group that goes, we should do a Grand Prix
or something, just some kind of mega event, you know? Like, they have a lot of cards and a lot of fights, and people love watching the fights, but
they could easily set up 4 months of fight nights where it's like, hey, we're going to do these who's number one.
The one thing they've never had that almost every other sport has is a WrestleMania, is a Super Bowl, is a final championship. I mean, you can't do like a final championship for the UFC, but what you can do is tournament finals.
Yeah, they talk about like a Super Bowl weekend card, which
is
big because Super Bowl
or
last one of the year card.
UFC 100, UFC 200. The numbers are big, which is one of the reasons why I think they have so many cards, is so they can more quickly get to those big numbers.
That's what I like about like the PFL when they do the $1 million like end of the year tournament, that kind of stuff. I'm like, man, if the UFC did a who's number one and they find out who's number one the last pay-per-view, you have like 8 title fights. Can you imagine? Like the world would just.
Did you hear about PFL's dropping the ball with Kayla Harrison?
Heard about that.
They are dropping the fucking
Looks
rock.
Like the UFC is about to have a 55 weight class.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, where are they going to find the money to pay her? I mean, she's been making a free $1 million for the past 2 years or whatever. It's been free work for her, and they're going to have to create a whole division around her. I mean, I don't really think that the UFC. If I was the UFC, I wouldn't be that interested. Unless you can make 45. Can you make 45?
The UFC doesn't need her.
They've never really needed any women talent until there was one like Ronda.
15, 25, 35, like those, like 45 is kind of just like a.
Do you think there will ever be a female fighter? Well, I don't want to say ever. Do you think there will be in the next 10 years a female fighter that's as popular as Ronda Rousey?
Oh yes.
Really?
Oh, 100%. You're gonna see some chick come along where it's like. She's gonna be some bisexual like warlord, like some of like both sides. Like,
obviously,
something that like dudes and chicks will both be into. Just
yeah, I was gonna say
new alpha Viking like wave of woman is gonna come around. Everyone's gonna go like it'll be like the Gabbard of MMA is gonna come along.
If Amanda taught us anything, it's that being dominant, even to the utmost extent, is not enough.
It's like how much I love Amanda Nunes, and she's not used as like such like a role model for like MMA. For being like the first.
Obviously, the UFC could push her harder. The UFC could push her harder, but
is like this person will come along, but the UFC might not.
Their base is too right.
But then you have like Amanda Nunes, who she's like, yeah, I'm a lesbian,
right?
And she just hangs out.
But the UFC's base is not people that would care about that. So I think that's one of the reasons why they don't. But Ronda's not even, she's not a good-looking gal. It's something else, right? It's like that. It's like that intangible thing that so few people have, and then when they do have, they come along and you're like, could this be? And then they don't win.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that like my eyes were really opened to how much more popular she is than Amanda Nunes, because we've obviously Amanda Nunes has been kind of in the conversation ever since she lost to Juliana. Like, is this the end of this incredible run that she's had?
Well, it's just the runs in MMA are so much shorter than other sports.
Yeah.
Like if you had like Ronda Rousey, what she did for judo itself. Like
yes.
I knew who Ronda was like in judo beforehand. You'll see women in boxing, women in Muay Thai, women in BJJ who have much longer reigns who can still build up hype. Like Ronda.
She's a hype machine.
Like MMA is just like a.
I think that people that are
it chews you up and spits you out to a different level. Like boxing, you can have longer reigns.
Yeah, it does.
You can have longer reigns to build. Like even Gina Carano had like a good run in Muay Thai before. Yeah. Like her MMA run, and in MMA, I think that window is so short. Like the women talent pool, I tell people is a different type of savage. Like the women's class is changing like every year.
It is.
So it's hard for them to build that superstar where like the guys' class windows are like that 4 to 5. Not like John Jones is the first like 10-year run kind of guy.
Ever.
Where you can't beat him.
Right.
The women run windows are like 2 years. Male run windows are like 4 to 5.
But I also
and so in a couple of years we're gonna find that woman that can be at the top, that can hold it down like Ronda Rousey, and can defend it like Amanda Nunes. Like that's gonna come along.
The Terminator, the fucking
like
the perfect storm.
Like a Valentina that can tell jokes and not be a monstrous robot. Like
Valentina, in my opinion.
I tell people like Valentina has a thing where I look at her and just go, if she says, "Hey, we're going here," I would just go, well, "Bye, Tony.
Right.
Sorry, I'm getting put on a leash. Like I have to go with her." But like. But she doesn't have that public appeal. A lot of other women, like Ronda, just had that.
She certainly tries.
Like,
she certainly tries.
Valentina.
Tries her ass off.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that I think a lot of people who are embedded in the community that aren't women fighters that got into the sport because of her or found out about the sport because of her, I think that a lot of people have this like either bad opinion of her or just a sour taste in their mouth about her based on just how she left things. But the last 2 weekends ago when she came out for the Royal Rumble and won the Royal Rumble, people went crazy. Like, it was the loudest pop of the night. And, you know, I'm not here to debate the intelligence of the average MMA fan versus the average wrestling fan, but the point I'm making is that Ronda is a hype machine. She's a hype machine, and people... Even when she fucks up, people are so invested in what she's going to do next. Like, John is the same way. No matter how bad John fucks up, people are very invested in what happens to him next. And more so even after he fucks up. He seems to get bigger following-wise every time he has a fiasco like this.
He has that Mike Tyson effect.
Yeah, and, you know, Ronda was certainly no Mike Tyson, but I think that she was in the right place at the right time where you were saying how... The savageness of that women's division, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the meta is catching up.
It's such a new,
yes,
like watching,
it's new ground.
Watching male sports like grow, like women's MMA has evolved more in like 8 years than men's MMA has evolved in 20.
I would agree.
Like when I look at it, I just go like you've seen
especially
like entirely new. Like as someone that coaches men and women,
yeah,
it is the same sport, but it's completely different as far as like how fast women can learn. Like,
and you look at like just how it's changed in the last like 5-6 years that I've been really closely following the sport, like from Joanna just beating the brakes off of Carla Esparza to having one of the most technical fights of all time versus Zhang Weili. It's just crazy how much those fighters have even evolved, because it's evolving in such a short amount of time that we're seeing big skill changes, like big change of directions within the fighter's career. Getting back to the card, since we're talking about this, someone who's been pretty much here the whole time, Roxanne Modafferi, having her final fight against Casey O'Neill, and in a crazy fight, but we'll all remember Roxanne Modafferi's career-defining moment. She beat the absolute brakes off Macy Barber and took the hype train off the rails. So I mean, you can't underestimate her.
Things where I was like, man, I can't believe 25-20. Oh my god.
You can't underestimate her though.
No, like Roxanne, like just her name has been like in just fighting forever. Like as long as I've been around fighting, like it's gonna be weird to like not hear Roxanne's name.
I met her once.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. Where?
At Otakon 2016. I used to date this girl who was super into cosplay and going to anime cons, and I got kind of begrudgingly drug along. And I remember I was looking at the program, and they were like, anime and martial arts, host Roxanne Modafferi. And I was like, okay, I'm going to this. There's no other UFC fighter here. Who am I going to talk to?
Yeah,
so
she and we just said earlier, War Master.
That might not have been the name of the panel if she ends up saying this.
Daniel Cormier, Josh Barnett. Like, she and Josh Barnett have both been in like that anime scene. Like it's just like they've and with her being around, like it's gonna be weird that her name won't be mentioned in fighting anymore. So she's been around like since like 2000. Like she was, I think it's about like early 2000s.
I mean, I remember that she was
living and fighting in Japan.
In Japan.
Just so she could learn both pro wrestling under Josh Barnett. She's one of Josh Barnett's students,
right?
And just because she loved the culture, and because that's where the female fighters were at that time. Like,
it's
there
like
won't be another Roxanne.
Her and who's the other girl that's been around forever? Well, I guess she's not really a fighter anymore. Felice Herring is who I was thinking of. I think she was also on the Japan kick for a while.
Felice Herring was a long-time kickboxer.
That's right. That's what it was. Long-time kickboxer. Yeah.
Like fought in Thailand and stuff like that.
And as her career progressed, she became known more as a grappler. You know, she started crushing people from the back, you know, which is kind of goes back to what we were saying about how these women have to evolve because their game just completely changes. But yeah, I think Casey O'Neill obviously is going to be your favorite by far. She's so brutal. Talk about taking the back and crushing people.
This is talking about like the first wave of women's fighting.
Now
fighting the newest wave of women's fighting.
Correct.
And Casey O'Neill started fighting as a teenager.
She's an athlete. She's a
what belt is she in jiu-jitsu? Like she's above purple.
I think she's a brown belt, if not a black belt. If not, I could look it up. But I mean, I believe that she's just so good. The one thing that Roxanne kind of has going for her is that she is obviously so tenacious, but she's very good at not getting submitted.
Yes.
She's very scrambly, but what can she make happen off of a scramble, right?
The downside is that she is just like she's so on her feet. Like when I mean like keeps on her toes. Roxanne fights with two flat feet. Very flat feet. She doesn't back down, and I feel like that could just run into some problems. Like Casey is going to be kind of finding shots at will, and Roxanne is that kind of chick where she won't take a step back, and she's going to be just on all of Casey's punches. And man,
so I would imagine that Casey's a black belt because it says
I still pick Roxanne by late submission.
It says she's been training jiu-jitsu since she was 13 years old, so I imagine she's a black belt by now. Still looking for that info, but she's a brown belt. It says right here, brown belt under Casey Halstead. Okay, but that fight. It's a tough fight to have as your last fight, but it's also the kind of fight that someone like Roxanne is going to ask for. Yes, exactly. Speaking of people who should take their last fight, Andre Arlovski taking on Jared Vendera.
What in the
fuck is going on with Andre Laurovsky? Yeah.
How is he? But the dude's on a win streak.
He was. I think he just lost one, but he was on a little win streak where he was
3 or 4 fight win
he was
streak
decisioning the fuck out of people.
He was, but good. Like he decisioned Tanner Bowes.
I
was actually really worried about. Andre
I think he just realized that he's like he's better on the cage than most heavyweights.
Yeah, he's like, let me just jab and stick.
Back you up to the cage. Yep.
He's like, he can still fight. Like I don't think he doesn't
talk about a division that hasn't evolved in the past 20 years. Heavyweight is kind of Cyril was the kind of first evolved heavyweight we'd seen in a long time.
He would be the future, but then France is like, nah.
I'm gonna wrestle fuck you. Yeah,
like, sorry,
it's funny because I know I won't get another chance to say this, but we were watching that fight together, and your boy Saeed was there, and he was like, "What do you think's gonna happen in this fight?" I was like, "Well, obviously anything could happen, but it would be crazy if one of them, particularly Francis, just had a strategy to just wrestle fuck him." And so he was like, "That'll never happen." And then as soon as Francis hit that takedown, he looks at me and he's like, "You called it." And I was like, "Well, we'll see if he can hold it." But yeah, that was a mystic McGrath moment for sure. Andre Arlovski kind of been wrestle fucking people, but not taking them to the ground. Just like we said, his cage control is better. And, talking to guys like Cody Malte and Dewan Owens, they're big on that cage wall. They think that is a very, underdeveloped area in the game.
You have to use the cage in MMA.
Right.
Like boxers and kickboxers use the corner in the ring.
Yeah.
You have to know how to punch a person in that cage, control them on the cage, control, how you're coming off that cage with strikes, how control coming off that cage so they can't strike you.
Correct.
And it is just now that wrestling is everywhere in MMA.
It's the focus for a lot of coaches.
Now, that wall is that new trench zone.
Yes.
Everyone is very comfortable with the up and down. But
wrestlers are, especially.
Everyone is understanding up, down, and fighting. But now it's the on, off of the wall.
Yeah.
On, off. On the wall, down the wall, back up the wall, going up and down on the wall. That is harder than anything that you can, that is a
because you're getting pressed into the wall. The lactic acid builds up in your back, and then you get taken down on top of that, and you're getting Dagestani handcuffed, and you're building your bridge. I mean, it's just so much work to
I'm a big believer
be pressed up against the cage.
Using the ropes and using the cage.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it makes people second guess where they want to be at in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It makes them sometimes step erratically. they get to the middle and they go, I don't want to be here because I might want the ropes. So they start moving too much, and they end up over-moving themselves into a counter strike, outside head kick. They move into a power shot. Like, they freak out by not going to the ropes or wall at that point. So the wall is just good for Andre, man. He's like,
yeah, good for Andre.
I'm losing these slug fights in the middle. I can jab in the middle. I can be a big old dude on the wall.
But Jared Vendera by KO is what I'm saying right now.
Really?
I mean, I just think that, like, Andre...
I saw this dude's record, I'm like, yeah, Andre would probably lose to a guy with a 12-6 record. Right
I mean, honestly, like, I don't think it's unheard of that Andre goes out there and holds him against the wall for 15 minutes, but he has to fight in a way where he just doesn't get hit at all, because Jared Vendera hits pretty hard. I would think harder than Tanner Bose. I mean, Tanner Bose is obviously a really big guy, but he doesn't sit on his punch. I mean, he's like kind of winging punches most of the time. Yeah. Vendera's got way cleaner striking. He can like actually sit on his punches and send them like home really tight, and that's that window.
We'll see where Andre stays behind that jab. He's getting better about moving behind it.
I was gonna say that was my next.
It's like, where like he uses that jab. And he knows where to be behind that jab. As long as he can just stay, like, that window is this big.
Right,
now,
exactly.
Like, yeah.
The window of when you stop jabbing and start like Frankensteining forward to like hold them against the fence, that window is where you get knocked out. Yeah. And that window gets smaller and smaller every fight because guys know that you're going to try to press them against the cage and ride them.
Like, what Andre's game plan is. He's running like, well, I'm going to punch him past that jab. He's probably look for short punches and maybe send him home.
Now we've had our appetizer, and let's get into the main course.
They always put heavyweight fights before like main cards now.
Yes, and that's a good way. Like I was saying, that's a good way to end the prelims, because they either are over really early and you have a lot of time to play promotional stuff for the pay-per-view, or they drag on really long and they give production more time to get the pay-per-view ready. Yeah. So it's really beneficial to the UFC to run it like that.
Or it makes the first fight look really good if it's a bad heavyweight fight.
Yeah. Exactly. But before we get into the main card, big shout out to our sponsors at Badge of Honor. Thank you guys for always supporting the endeavors on this channel and helping out with the podcast and helping out with some of the equipment that we're using today. But Bobby...
sponsor plug.
It's easy. Bobby Green taking on Nasrat Hakprazat.
That guy.
He's a monster. I watched a lot of his finishes earlier today, and I couldn't believe that the UFC putting out the promotional stuff didn't include like some of his finishes, or at least one, because they were putting out this Instagram post where they were like some insane finishes from fighters on this card, and you have obviously you're gonna have Ty, Israel, Derek, the big boys. They had Casey O'Neill crunching a girl's neck in half in there, and I was just like, man, this Nasrat guy has murked people. Like, right? Yeah, I mean. Yeah. Bobby Green, been around forever, kind of on the decline. I think
he is. So he was declining because he was just going out and fighting.
Yes, those Lando Venata fights.
His coaches have been like, dude, you've been doing this for a long time. Do this here, do this.
Yeah, his last fight was good.
There, and he even says, he's like, look, man, like, I've been looking at it like someone. He talks about he's kind of getting past the whole, I've been homeless, I was crazy, I've got tattoos on my head.
Yeah.
That was great when he was in King of the Cage. His King of the Cage runs back in the day were legendary.
It's technique time now.
Yeah. And so now he's like, man, I spent all this time training. I've got the technique down. He knows how to fight. So now he is fighting like a mixed martial artist.
Yes.
But
as you get older, you have to.
His fight with Fiziev.
Yeah, I was gonna say, great fight.
Did he get stopped in that?
I don't think so.
He got tagged a couple times, but like a lot of people had Bobby Green really written. I think even me, I was like, ooh, that's a tough fight.
Yeah.
But Bobby Green had some great moments, and Fiziev is no joke.
Certainly not. Certainly not. He's probably gonna murk Rafael.
What Bobby Green did in that fight, if he is progressing past that, going like, oh, I can do this all the time, and it's way more beneficial for me.
But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll do. I think that
because he's a crazy man. So we'll see if he can do that twice in a row.
Is a good thing because he will fight Nasrat everywhere they go.
If you can go out there and do that again.
Yeah.
If you can fight like that again, then yes. But if he fights like he fought against Dustin Poirier, even though that was a great fight for him too, long time ago, but a great fight for him. Yeah. But look where those two guys are now.
Yeah.
You know, and same thing with Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson dusted Dustin Poirier, and I thought that was when I wrote Dustin off. I was like, oh, he's left for dead, you know.
Bobby Green's one of those guys that just has always been a doer,
right?
And he's from the last generation of people that could just do.
Yes.
And now I think he's like, ooh, that sunset's a bit closer than I thought.
Yeah,
he might spend these last couple of years where he's like, man, I get to open up a pay-per-view. I think he sees, like, the better he does. Like, he might not be a Jorge Masvidal in a couple fights, but I feel like Bobby's going to want to go out with some kind of better reputation than the guy that just showed up to fight. So
and showed up for bangers.
Yeah.
Because he's had some bangers.
I think this dude still has a lot of, like, technical street fight in him. If he doesn't have enough to go be a wild man.
Yeah.
But if he turns into, like, a technical dogfight, I think that's where he shines. Like with Fiziev. He didn't throw the best strikes, but he threw them from great places and great times.
And that's a world-class striker you're dealing with, by the way.
And I'm like, man, could Bobby Green throw it out the window?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know, but man, I really hope that we see Bobby Green.
I'll tell you what.
I like Bobby Green, man.
I've never watched a Bobby Green fight and been bored. Yeah. So I mean, I think that it'll be fun no matter what.
As a coach, who people that know me know I'm a stickler for technique and footwork as a coach, but I love people like Bobby Green because you can't make them; they're just made that way.
Right? Yeah. Justin Gaethje's the same way.
Yeah, I'm like, man, there's something unique to that cat. And I love people like.
And he's like you said, he's one of the last of a dying breed for sure.
100%.
And then Kyler Phillips, I think this is a guy that the UFC is trying to build to expose to the world. I mean, obviously he's very, very good. He's had a great run as of late, but I think they're putting him in this slot, this 3 fights before the main event slot, because they want people to take notice of him.
These are the kind of. It's funny growing up watching boxing for so long and looking at boxing fight cards. Like they always had in boxing that fighter those guys fight at this time. Like there's always dead pay-per-view time. And you'll see down the line the guys are this Kyler Phillips guy. If this was a boxing matchup, it would be an 11-0 against a 16-8.
He hasn't
kind of thing,
He hasn't fought since he lost in July last year, so he's kind of coming back from that. But that was also
this just one of those when I see the records like this, I think of looking at the old boxing cards and we're man, I think we know who's supposed to win on this one.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of a setup / comeback fight for him to reintroduce him to the top of the bantamweight division.
As far as that being I feel this should be on the I know they want to build up Kyler Phillips, but I feel this could have been a prelim.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Especially, considering, I mean, he beat Donger. He beat Song Yadong. He beat Song Yadong, and then he had that fight of the night against Julian Palva. He took a lot of damage, and he just is taking the time off, and hopefully that time off is going to help him. Hopefully he looks better than ever. I mean, I love when guys have to take a lot of time off, and they do. I hate seeing a guy have a fight like that where they obviously take so much damage, and then they're fighting again. And
you get a couple more years in that way.
Tony Ferguson, fighting Justin Gaethje and then coming back immediately.
Man, why would and then Tony Ferguson, same thing. Why cut weight if you don't have to make weight, bro?
Right.
Such a dumb that. That took away his window of greatness in the Justin Gaethje fight. I think, man.
This is where we get into the real meat of it here. This is the nitty gritty right here. So our North Carolina boy, Derek Brunson, who's been obviously ever since he dyed his hair, he's been on an absolute tear coming back through the middleweight division. He's fought both men in the main event, lost to both by KO, and is a different guy than the guy who got KO'd by Izzy and got KO'd by Robert Whittaker.
Derek has been doing the veteran thing lately, man. You saw for a while he was coaching himself. And that's when he was getting knocked out by Whittaker and Adesanya. He
used to also be very one-dimensional in his approach, and he is no longer like that. But he got to the top of the middleweight division, just fucking running and destroying people. Yeah. He could knock people out, but he also was just a wrestler of wrestlers.
Camp to train,
right?
Stuff like that.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're also he would just go out and do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now.
Yeah, he runs a very successful school in Wilmington, not too far from here.
Hooking up with Henry Hoof
has
been a great change.
He's added dimensions to the game.
He's made him do less.
But he can do more.
He can do more.
He can do more.
Like he can do way more.
But because he's not blitzing,
so calculated that he's getting so much out of doing little things here and there. Like he's getting more out of one strike here and there. He's getting like one guaranteed entry and takedown instead of just spamming sometimes behind shots. Like
that was more what I mean by the adding of the dimensions. I don't mean that he's being more active. I mean that he's being less active, which is creating more opportunity for him because it's more of a mystery what he's going to do to you.
When you saw heavyweights in boxing, it was always backwards. They learn how to knock someone out and they learn how to jab. Mm-hmm. Where everyone else has to learn how to jab before they knock someone out. And Derek has always had what?
Power and strength.
Check hook has always it flatlined Machida.
He's got the delts of a god.
He is the most Michael Phelps man in combat.
He's dealt it up,
He is all delts and lats, bro. And he's always had that check hook, so we always relied on that. Or he's I touch someone, they go down. Not his wrestling as well. But now working behind a jab.
Speaking of guys that touch you and put you down, he's up against Jared Cannonier.
And this man, I love Derek. I remember before he had his first section fights, he used to fight at Club Rocks in Wilmington, which was an underground fight. And then on Wednesdays or Tuesdays, you could fight someone from the crowd. And that's how Derek got into
it's like an open mic, but for fighting.
It was like the North Carolina version of Never Back Down, and now we have Juan
Bully beat down
instead of Dijon Hansu here. But he's fighting Jared Cannonier,
who's a beast.
Not only physically scary, I think the man is mentally insane.
Yeah, I mean, he believes in crystals.
Man, he is all over. Jared Cannonier.
Nothing wrong with crystals, by the way.
Nothing wrong with crystals, but
crystal it up.
Jared Cannonier, just the type of person he is, the type of person Derek is. Derek's I don't care how hard someone hits.
Yeah.
You should care
a little bit
about how hard Jared Cannonier hits.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's also about someone like Jared Cannonier. He doesn't care about you. I don't think he cares about himself that much.
Right.
He is a force of destructive peace that is it's unsettling to face someone like that.
But he's shown the kink in the armor before, which is the wrestling, which we all know Derek excels at. Yeah. So it's going to be a classic guy trying to knock guy out and then guy trying to wrestle guy.
Older guys.
Yes, that's it.
On the wrong side of their 30, so I wonder
I feel like Derek's just coming into his prime.
Derek, I think, showed that he was taking just a step back in his last fight.
Oh yeah, he did play it a little slower.
He played it a little bit slower, and I was I wonder if that was on purpose. I don't know, because Cannonier has never had speed.
He'll have to play it slower.
Had connection. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so with Cannonier, you got to play the slow game
right
with him.
Right.
Cannonier, because he's slower, he will beat the faster guy. So I'm man, I wonder what Derek shows.
He's got great timing.
It's a very awkward he has heavyweight timing for a middleweight.
Exactly.
He used to be a super.
He was
heavyweight.
A big boy back then too.
He started at super heavyweight in Alaska. So and he has that heavyweight timing where he can beat a faster guy because he'll watch the whole body and just put his hand in the way and make people run into
yes.
him.
I think it is a little questionable if he maintained all of his power from 205 to 185, but I think he's looked pretty good at 185. I think it's a good weight class for him. He definitely looks in good shape. He looks like an action figure at 185. So.
And I wonder how, now these two guys who have both been used to 5-round fights, now they're packed into a 3-round. Are they going to fight like they have 3 5s?
Yeah.
Or are they going to start or are we going to see them kind of finish that third and they're like, oh fuck, we ran out of time.
Yeah.
They're going to finish that third and they're like, all right, see you in the fourth, and they're like, oh no.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen.
They get up kind of slow from.
Someone might die in this fight. We also might see a really boring match.
Yeah, it has one of those potentials to be a stinker if Jared can't get going and Derek plays it slow.
Yeah,
like he did in his last fight.
And here's the thing, me, man, I'm okay with seeing Derek win a slow fight.
Just grind it out. Man, just grind it out, get the win.
I love Derek. I like the guy. I'm just he's a good dude. You get to know the guy, and I'm man, good guy. I want to see the best for him. Yeah.
Speaking of two guys you want to see the best for,
I know.
I don't want to see either one of these motherfuckers lose.
Can we just watch these?
And I especially don't want to see
watch these guys play as each other on stand and bang mode. I'm just UFC 4. I'll watch that for.
I'm also just tired of. I'm tired of seeing Derek Lewis lose in Houston. I think that he's lost the last 2 fights they've booked for him in Houston, and it's just a heartbreaker. Let's see. Hold on. I think he lost to Mark Hunt in Houston a while ago.
No, did he?
But that might have been somewhere else. Let's look up Derek's record here. But yeah, I mean, just two guys that are incapable of being in a boring fight for the most part. Derek obviously had that anomalous fight with Francis, but I mean, I think that was just as much Francis as it was Derek's.
It takes two to tango.
It does,
and they were both not in that fight.
But you know, Derek's all action and always a personality, and Ty's the other guy at heavyweight who has a personality.
Yes.
You know, everybody else at heavyweight is kind of a bland, stale cracker.
Like, you know, watching Derek Lewis and Kyle Dawkins, I was just like, man, what a clash of personality.
Right,
bro.
exactly, yes. Derek is that way. He's counter to a lot of things we believe about martial arts.
Yeah, Derek Lewis is someone I want to watch him keep fighting. At the same time,
he lost to Cyril Gahn in Houston.
He did.
And
I remember that. But who else did he lose to in Houston? Yeah.
Okay, he beat Ilir Latifi in Houston the fight before that, so thank God.
Okay. So that's good for Derek has already had.
It was Austin that I was thinking of, and I was confusing it for Auckland, which is where Mark Hunt beat him. So yeah, my bad. Derek, but I don't like seeing Derek lose in Houston, and this fight takes place in Houston, so I'm rooting for Derek. But I love Ty, and I also think that heavyweight could use new blood, a young guy like him, also a guy who was. Had his ass whooped, cut from the UFC, came back and went on like a 3-fight win streak. Pretty dope. So I mean, there's just a lot of storylines in this fight that have nothing to do with each other. That have nothing to do with any kind of beef between these two guys.
Yeah, I hated seeing guys like this. Like, just even seeing them in interviews, I'm like, man, y'all are not going to be the same person after you guys. Like, whoever gets knocked out in this fight is
could be the same. Could be.
Like, this is like one of those fights where, like, just my standpoint is like, someone's going to leave something behind in this fight.
So I think Ty comes out and leg kicks the shit out of Derek Lewis a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think his strategy is going to be.
I think Derek Lewis is going to win by jumping switch kick.
Derek's had trouble.
Win by jump something.
I especially went back to watch that Mark Hunt fight, and the kicks are really what struggle. I mean, he said he needed a backiotomy after that fight or something. Like he said his back was messed up.
I know he had to lose 20 pounds.
But yeah, he obviously looks way better than he did back then, and that was years and years and years ago.
Well, he is, like, and I jokingly said jumping switch kick, but like Kyle Dawkins.
He's got a great one.
As soon as Kyle threw that low kick, Derek went, okay, jump switch kick.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if you try to kick someone in the leg and it's not there and there's a foot hitting you in the face, you start like I think his plan to counter low kicks is by doing wild athletic shit.
Maybe. I mean, that would be dope to see a jumping switch kick knockout from Derek Lewis. He's been fishing for it for long enough.
Into that world of like the UFC 4 knockouts are getting realer and realer.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Knockouts, and I don't know. Like, could that really happen? No. Like, that is my like. Maybe like one like my Doctor Strange.
Well, it's just that
to win, but like I think that he might catch Ty setting up those low kicks. And Derek will throw something.
He's been throwing that jumping switch kick since that Mark Hunt fight and getting better and better with it. Yeah. And like you said, he connected on Dawkins.
Could be just like a Superman punch
but
or something. I could see
I just think that
doing something over a low kick to beat Ty, but Ty could just also. Ty has it in him to be a methodical banger.
There's a big
chop in behind a guard and find counters on the inside and let Derek punch outside.
There's a big difference between getting kicked in the leg by Kyle Dawkins and getting kicked in the leg by Tai Tuivasa, who has a Samoan leg.
And Ty is smarter about being inside on the brawl instead of.
And he's more comfortable in brawling.
Where when he beat Hardy, he was inside the brawl, where Derek is someone that is always outside the brawl.
Just outside, though. He invites you in and then kind of backs up a little bit and then blasts you with the Infinity Gauntlet.
However, Derek is on the outside, where he'll start winning the brawl. As soon as you back up, then Derek's
inside on you.
Inside.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, these guys like both fight inside the brawl.
That's how he got Curtis Blades. He invited Curtis Blades in. Curtis ducks down. He got Dawkins the same way.
And then
I remember it was it might have been the last Fight For It or the Fight For It before that, but I was driving home from Fight For It at like 10 o'clock at night, and I got a notification that someone was tweeting that Derek was walking out and the main event was about to start. I literally like whipped my car into a CVS parking lot. I'm just on my phone watching Kyle Dawkins versus Derek Lewis. I'm like, I'm not missing a Derek Lewis fight.
The parking lot next to you getting busted for meth.
Or just in their car smoking weed, waiting on their weed dealer or something. I'm just like,
the UFC.
But I've had a lot of moments like that in my life before we move on to the main event where I just like had to stop what I was doing and watch the fight. I remember I was with my girlfriend at a concert, and the concert let out. The concert was letting out, and I was like, no, almost. I kept refreshing my feed to see when it was. And you'll understand why in a moment. But I kept refreshing my feed, waiting for this fucking main event, and like, I'm just gonna go to the bathroom and watch it in the bathroom and pretend that I was in there having diarrhea or something. I'll just make up something. She's not going to remember that the UFC's on tonight. But the concert ends, and I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. I'm going to have her drive home and watch this fight the whole way home. It's going to be great. And then she's like, I want to stay and try to meet the band. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then we're just sitting there. We're just sitting there standing in a line, and just like all these other girls that are here to see this like pop punk teenage boy band. And I'm just sitting there like, I think I'm going to go to the car. And she's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, the car's right there. I can see you. It'll be safe. And I'm just like, she's like, oh, okay. And I just walk. I literally walk into the car, and I immediately am like, and I'm watching fucking Anderson versus Israel on Sonya. I was like, I'm not missing this.
She'd be more excited to see you in the car with another woman than are you just
yes, exactly. I was
hoping you'd be here with a woman.
I wasn't monitoring your safety at all. I could have cared less. Izzy is doing the Naruto pose against Anderson right now, lady.
I can't miss this. This is all I've got. You don't know.
But I've always felt that way since Israel, pretty much since he knocked out Brunson. I was like, this guy's must see TV. Yeah. Like, and I think that this is like a back-to-back main event co-main, that it's just like, this could have been either one of these could have main evented any card.
If you salivate for violence, like that's a very violent like
co-main main. Yeah. What do you think Robert Whittaker's got to do to beat Israel?
So, what I'm curious about this is how Robert's going to play on the outside. Not when I say play, I mean how he's going to handle the outside.
Well, the fight didn't exist there in the last fight because Rob just came forward. Yes, exactly.
And we talked about this where you're like, when I said what I think that Rob might catch Izzy with but not finish him, Robert has such a slick inside high kick.
Yes, 100%.
And I think with Robert now, like Robert could not find that. Like he tried to throw it in front of Izzy, and Izzy's like, okay. So I think that Rob's going to try and find this on the outside as like almost like a jab to counter Izzy's head movement.
Very dramatic head movement.
Very dramatic head movement. I think like Robert's been talking about his mental shift, not just his technical shift, but his mental shift of his boxing game, where he always tried to turn his boxing into a fight instead of boxing. And he even says, like, look, every time I try to fight these boxers, I lose. Every time I box with them, all of a sudden I'm jabbing. I'm getting new angles, and he's learning new placements. So he's going to be a bit more comfortable on the outside. You see him using that tight inside high kick to try and corral, but at the same time,
I think
Israel Adesanya.
I was about to say, I think comfortability is your enemy. Like if you, the longer
he's gonna lull himself into a false sense of comfortability, and I think like he might make Izzy go, oh no, in like the third or fourth, and then after that, like I could see if Robert gets an oh no off in the second, it's over in the third. If he gets an oh no going in the third, it's over in the fourth. I see the finish happening before the fifth.
Every exchange that is like it's like prolonging the fight. Like if you're in an exchange and your intention is to like not finish Israel in that moment, but to like continue the exchange, it is detrimental to you. So like the more comfortable you are standing and boxing, the more Israel will make you feel comfortable.
And Izzy does a lot of like damage over time off of single shots.
And
I think people don't see that, and we talk about like his like lead diamond. Like there's levels of getting hit by strikers. Like where Robert Whittaker, he's an aggressive guy, but he's also actually a wrestler. He was an Australian wrestling champion. His background is wrestling and rugby, not striking. So where Izzy is at, what Izzy does with one strike, like behind all of Robert's like exchanges, like that adds up. And guys like Robert, they can take big shots well. They can't take the buildup of these little like. And what I mean, like a little shot by Izzy, people see him step and they see him put his two knuckles anywhere they want. But that from Izzy, his entire body is behind it. He knows when to connect on Robert.
Timing.
After the strike, the
technique
timing of it, the technique, just like how that bullet feels going through.
It is a big ask. I think a lot of people are underestimating how big of a task this is for Robert Whittaker.
Yeah.
If he can pull this off, I mean, it'll be one of the best comeback championships of all time, because he was utterly defeated in that. I mean, that was a time where most people thought he was like a world killer, unbeatable, and he just looked the same as Brunson. Like, he looked the same as Brunson against Israel.
Like,
so, I mean,
we saw what Izzy did to Paulo Costa, and Paulo Costa's a different person. Where Robert just went, man, that's not happening again.
Well, I just think that, like, when Israel first came on the scene, it was like, I have to just take this guy down and submit him or beat him up. And so Israel was just like, all right, come on and try to take me down. Yeah. And now guys are like being a little bit more thought out. Like, I do have to exchange with him on some level, but I have to use that to create dynamic openings for grappling and takedowns to be introduced. But then you have the fact that Israel is so good at sprawling.
He
and Granby rolling.
Striking, there's so much more than the center line.
Yes.
The wrestling entry, no matter what, whether that line is this long or that long, it's a straight line. And Izzy is never on. I mean, like, he couldn't get out of Jan's line, but Jan's also as wide as a door frame.
Yes.
So there's a difference between getting grabbed
by a
heavyweight and a light heavyweight.
There's a lot to say about the Jan fight.
Yeah, but Jan, when I said Jan, I was like, no, not Peter Jan.
There's a lot to say about the Blachowicz fight.
Yeah, exactly. However, where Izzy puts himself like just out that center line, and we talked about that, like the strikers coming into MMA, like they know the straight line game better than wrestlers, because wrestlers have one line, and Izzy's going to be off of all these little lines.
Right, that's how he catches people with these.
He couldn't escape. Like, Robert's coming at him like a truck. Jan came at him like a bus. And Izzy can move away from a truck if it's here.
I was thinking
he can't move away from the bus that's like 3 trucks wide when he's in front.
I was thinking Robert is like a truck going straight at him 80 miles an hour, but the way that Jan approached it was like a steamroller. Yeah. Like, I'm coming at you in a straight line, but I'm like, da-na-na, like the Bionic Man in slow motion. Like, I just feel like Jan just had so much durability that he could get really on the inside.
I really loved how slow he was moving Izzy into the cage.
And Israel
I couldn't get out of here.
Israel just couldn't circle away.
Yeah.
Israel just had no...
By creating...
I think that's the fight where...
Izzy was fighting his... and this is why I talk about the straight lines, where, like, here's that little straight line, and Izzy was here, and Jan happened to be, like, this continuous... I call it, like, guillotining someone into a corner, where it's a slower approach, but it doesn't stop. So Izzy is constantly working inside this little space, and Jan was suffocating that little space in as he walked him down. And that's what you mean by that like 3 cars wider, like a steamroller. Okay. Oh, keep moving out of the way. No matter where you move, you're
like
still
the slow and escapable.
And with like Whittaker, that 80 miles an hour, 1 car wide. Fuck, shit, go on.
But a good example of a fight that we just saw where somebody was trying to use the steamroller strategy and got fucked up was Brian Battle versus Tresean Gore.
Man,
what a game plan from Brian Battle.
Yeah.
Like, definitely a fight that you lose on paper in every dimension, except for the fact that you and your fucking coaches at Higheston are 300 fight IQ, and you just, like, see the one technique that's going to completely shut somebody down. I mean, I think that he must have teeped Tresean in the stomach like 55 billion times.
And he always had another kick behind that.
Yes.
And he never went to the same place twice. Like, he would go back to leg, go back to body, go back to head, but it was never teep leg, teep
And Israel's never been a big teeper. He has a good push kick, but he's never been a guy who just goes straight up. I think I've seen him like throw a front kick up the middle like once ever. I mean, he's off the line.
That's if there's a stalemate. And he'll push someone out of range just so he's... Like, if he puts himself on a line, you see that teep behind it because he's so far away.
Yeah, and I think a guy with limbs like him, especially at middleweight, where he's kind of the top... He's like a big dog at middleweight, not at light heavyweight, but he's just a normal guy at light heavyweight.
Yeah,
but
and Izzy does great with the guys that are more aggressive. And
yes.
I think that Whittaker is going to be... he's going to be the same truck. And I think that he's going to try and play the slower game, but he's not 3 trucks wide.
I think Yoel kind of put a little bit of info about Israel out there for all of us too, and it's the fact that like
gets shook when someone doesn't do that much.
It's not that he gets shook. It's just that he doesn't.
He gets flustered.
He gets flustered. He doesn't really have a way to create the exchanges as readily available to him.
A striker needs strikes thrown at it because
sometimes they do. A guy like him does.
I tell people like in striking. Some people tell me like, when do I punch and kick? And I say, well, all the time.
He's such a database guy.
And I'm like, well, because it's striking. You're always punching and kicking. It is striking. The name of the game is to punch and kick. Because behind that punch and kick, it is establishing your offense, your defense, and your download.
Yeah, he is a download-based fighter.
And you have to get strikes thrown at you download.
Yes.
If I don't throw strikes at you, then you can't tell really where I'm coming from. And it's also with, Izzy knew, this guy can cover a football field in one spring. So that made him very much, he's like, okay, well, if I do try to come in, that's the old entrance to...
Well, he doesn't give people a lot of those entrances, even when they can't do that. Even when they can't do that.
Yeah, Izzy's like, no, you have to, I know how long I am.
But Yoel always had this strategy. He did it to Paulo Costa, too. In a 3-round fight, what you do is you just sit there and you don't do anything. You try to do as little as possible besides moving enough to where the ref is not going to cost you, right?
Yeah.
Then, in the last 30 seconds, you have a crazy big explosion, and as long as you successfully prevented anything from happening in those first 4 minutes and 30 seconds, you can steal that round with a 10-8.
Fucking 5-minute rounds, man.
And that's how Yoel figured out how to conserve his gas tank to make him last 3 rounds, and it worked for him against a lot of people. He stole a lot of rounds. And it wasn't until he fought Robert Whittaker and had to fight a 5-round fight where it really started becoming a problem. Because, Robert was taking the fight to him, too. Yeah, they were insane fights because he forced Yoel into action so much. And that's the big difference between Robert and Israel, is that Robert is not really afraid to get hurt to create action for himself.
Yeah.
Whereas, I feel like Israel's not necessarily afraid to get hurt. He's just so technical that he views every successful strike as a defeat.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't really hurt him. We all know he can take a punch. I mean, that Calvin Gastelum fight was a brutal one for him.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's afraid to get knocked out. I just think that he's so technical that he's obsessed with winning every single exchange.
Yeah.
And when he can't readily win it with the data he has, he just doesn't engage.
Yes.
And I think that that is a big problem for him, but it's not going to be a problem against Robert Whittaker. No. Because Whittaker's too self-involved and too high action for that. He's not going to win the belt with just by laying on Izzy or he's just, I can't see it. I can't really see it.
I feel like Robert's going to try and just fight technically aggressive from the outside.
You have to.
Dead ass inside.
You have to. So I feel like the person who will beat Israel at middleweight is someone who can be just technical enough to not get obliterated by him in the exchange, but has enough power to knock him out if they can clip him.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be a guy who comes along who's as technical as him in the next 5 years.
I feel like Robert's biggest scary weapon is just that tight inside head kick.
Yeah.
It's a head kick.
Especially catching Israel circling off the cage, because he does that thing where he really dives.
I see it in the middle. I see Robert trying to keep it in the middle to find a head kick and get Izzy to pull away from the head kick to move towards the cage.
Yeah, that too, because he does that too. But yeah, he leads.
That's when Izzy, you'll see the more his back is to the wall, the more his hands get away from him.
Yes.
And I talk about the strikers. Their backs to the wall, and they get longer to keep this space to create a stall to an exit.
Also, he's getting the post ready because he thinks that he's going to get pressed up against the cage, and he doesn't want that either. Yeah. So it kind of is two-pronged.
You're coming in, his hips are out.
Correct. Yeah, I think that I think it could be a very, very interesting fight, but I mostly, unless the strategy is just obviously, like you said, completely different, I think we'll see the same result. But that's the great thing about fighting, is that you can come back 3 years later with a completely different strategy, and maybe the other guy has one too, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's going to do the same thing.
It's that sport where you can just take the odds and throw them in the air most nights.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the big, we're talking about dominant champions. I think that's one thing that made Khabib so special, is that there was no mystery about what Khabib was going to do to you. You just had to figure out a way to avoid it as long as possible, whereas Israel has so many ways he can get to you. And I almost feel like sometimes that is overwhelming to him. But I just think that it's very hard to game plan for a guy like him. It's very, very hard.
100%.
Very hard to game plan for a guy like him. I think that success will come in the brawl for whoever does take the title from him, if anyone does.
Yep.
It'll be someone who can force him into a situation where he's uncomfortable and then pop him.
It's someone that can just match him. It's someone that won't be better. It's someone that can just match him everywhere.
Energy-wise, too.
Yeah, because just like be in his face, be outside his face, but keep the fight going to a rhythm that he doesn't like. And then Izzy just gets hit with something eventually, or it's a decision, something like that.
Israel said in an interview...
Well, he's going to get beat the same way he beat, Anderson Silva.
That's like the polar opposite of the Yoel thing. It's still a very, inactive fight, but...
It'd be amazing to see what the person can do that does that to Izzy. Here's what I hate is, I can't wait to see that fight, to see what that
his reaction
does to beat him.
I love that. And his reaction to that, because, seeing people, how they react to that kind of defeat in the same manner is just as interesting as seeing them fight sometimes. And Israel's a guy who I gained a lot of respect for him when he lost to Jan because of the way he handled the Jan loss. But I don't know if he can handle a loss like that as well, because that's a very different type of loss, right? Going up a weight class and
striker getting wrestled, there's whatever.
Well, also
getting outstruck, that's
a guy going up a weight class and getting wrestle fucked by a guy who's almost 35 pounds heavier than him on fight night is a lot different. Yeah. It's a lot different than having a guy who's the same weight
that ends up
outclassing you at what you're good at. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think anybody's ever come close to even being in the same class, let alone outclassing Israel in his realm. So I think it will probably take as long as it took for somebody to do it to Anderson.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see how it shakes out this weekend, because if Robert Whittaker wins, we got a whole new middleweight division. But if Israel wins, what the hell do you do with him? What do you do with him next?
They push the Pahea matchup to get Pahea versus Izzy.
He's got to fight. He's got to fight more.
No,
I'm sure that
people are like, Pahea, man, he needs good 5 or 6 fights before he gets to the title, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the UFC wants that fight to happen too, so I think they'll probably give him more favorable matchups, especially after his last fight where he KO'd that jiu-jitsu guy. That was kind of like you fought a jiu-jitsu guy and now we're going to match you up against...
Striker.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that the UFC will do everything in their power to make Alex successful enough to get to the fight.
100%.
But I don't know. I don't know if he can, because Israel had a very tough schedule, strength of schedule. It's not like they escorted him to the title. If anything, I think the UFC was kind of not really excited about a guy like him getting the title. And he also took out Robert Whittaker, who was one of their most popular stars at that time.
Yeah.
But I think that, he fought every type of fighter you can fight and every type of person. And almost every person that he fought tried to take him down and sub him. That was their strategy.
Yep.
And they all failed. So if Alex Pereira can adapt to the aspect of the game of takedown defense and avoiding the grappling as well as Israel had, then he'll probably, because we know he can strike like him. We know he's on the same level there. But
I can see Izzy winning by submission.
Israel's shown us just enough.
He would do that just to piss everybody off.
Israel has shown us just enough of his grappling and ground game for me to be confident that he is very comfortable.
Oh,
he doesn't want to be on the ground in a fight, but in a situation where he's not outclassed heavily by strength.
He knows his game well enough for him.
Right.
Don't ask him how to if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, don't go to him for jiu-jitsu advice.
Yes.
But Izzy knows what he needs to do with his skills.
He does this thing that
him and Eugene.
He does this thing that Patty the Baddie does when Patty's on bottom, which is that he'll just attack a random submission and create a moment for him to get back to the feet.
Jiu-jitsu 101.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in that Calvin Gastelum fight, it's fully on display. The triangle attempt.
One of my favorite ones is from a striker, Giga against Edson Barboza.
Yep. Great.
Like riding out that anaconda to the feet just to create a bump.
Just to create something, yeah. That was a great fight too, Giga Chikadze.
And that's something that I can see Israel running with, where he'll be applying some kind of choke, going you better defend or I'm going to make it in your feet. Then they go, fuck this, and he goes, okay.
And then I just submit you. Yeah.
Because he has that frame that can put a
long boy
from anywhere.
He is a long boy for sure. Yeah, I would love to see him in a super fight, like a grappling super fight, just to see more of what he's got. I just want to see more of what he's got.
Another purple belt.
Yeah, that would be cool.
He's a purple belt, so have him do another purple belt. I think that would be a great jiu-jitsu match.
Oh, him versus I think Junie might be a brown belt now, but Junie Osayo or Ocasio, that would be a cool match because I know that they're both kind of I think Israel's probably a little bit heavier than him, but somebody like on that level of a Juni Osayo or somebody like that would be really fun to watch. But yeah, Chael Sonnen, submission underground, book Israel Adesanya. You want to do it. That's it for UFC 271. Trevor, is there anything else you want to talk about fight-wise before we get out of here? Any crazy fight news? We just had Sean Strickland spar Jack Hermansen for $50,000.
So that was a fight where I think that Sean was just irked that Jack was still in there.
Yeah, sure.
Jack was in his face the whole time.
Yeah.
And you see it on
getting beat up.
Face where, like, yeah, Jack's getting beat up. But just like when you are someone like Sean that kind of goes off that I'm crazy, I can bang, and someone's in front of you for 5 like that, they're like, dude, can you just not be here anymore?
Well, that's the thing about
and it was wearing on Sean. You can see him going like, I'm glad this fight's about to be over.
But that's the thing about
he wasn't in danger. He was just like, I'm sick of hitting this.
You get to the UFC and guys don't just fall over from punches anymore. Like they got to this point for a reason. They're hard to knock out. You know, especially when you get up to the Jack Hermansens of the world. Like I think Sean Strickland probably gets the winner of that other fight. Like that or the loser of that other fight, rather, because the winner's probably going to fight the champ.
Yeah.
Derek and Cannonier. So maybe you match him up with the loser.
People have said that like Sean kind of missed his opportunity to be in title contention.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying he gets the loser.
Well, yeah, okay, he gets the loser.
That's why I'm saying he gets the loser. I think if he would have went out there and knocked out Jack Hermansen and got on the mic and been like, I'm a crazy motherfucker, blah, I'm from New Bern, North Carolina, blah, right, yeah, I think he might have been in there because he is, in every almost conceivable way, the opposite of Israel. Like, I mean, it's unquestionable that would be a fun lead up to a fight.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't think he inspires a lot of confidence, but I also think that he uses...
That's one of those fights that could just sell a pay-per-view.
He's one of those guys who I think uses that, like, I'm a bite down on my mouthpiece, go crazy type of motherfucker that wants to kill somebody in the octagon to distract from the fact that he's not really that special as a fighter. And he also... his stance is whack as fuck.
Yeah.
Can we agree that his stance is... his whole shit is whack?
He's one of those guys, if you put him in a boxing match, he would be good. Put him in a wrestling match, he would be good. Put him in a jiu-jitsu match, he would be good. But just put that motherfucker in a cage, he can just fight.
Right, he can fight. No one's disputing that he's one of the best middleweights.
This hand didn't work. Like, if a punch doesn't land, he just steps over.
But he's always like
hand.
This.
He's very herky.
Glued to the chest, and his hips are like on their own independent axis. Like he's always leaning forward. Sometimes he's leaning back.
You ever seen guys like Kelly Pavlik box? Like,
yes.
Like the white guys from the Midwest that box. It's like their upper bodies and their feet weren't connected, yet they could still step like Frankenstein and box.
Right. That's how I would describe Strickland as Frankenstein boxing.
It's Frankenstein boxing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a bunch of weird things that kind of work for him because he's him.
But he's also with one of the best guys in there, which is Eric Nicksack. You know, if anybody's going to turn you into a world caliber middleweight,
yeah,
as long as you make 185 pounds, it'd probably be him.
What Eric does is he's like, I don't know, Sean does Sean stuff, and I just tell him where to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Sean has and the thing about Sean that people are prepared for is that his fundamentals might not be the blueprint of everyone else's fundamentals, but Sean's fundamentals are great for Sean, for how he fights, and that's what's MMA, where you can have your fundamentals, you can have your flaws. But Sean has his fundamentals down to a T.
100%.
So Eric Nicksack, and this is something I've done as a coach, where I try to make people like fix their fundamentals instead of letting them shine for their attributes, but their other attributes like
not that great. Yeah.
Like there's kind of a big gap.
Yeah.
You know, where Sean doesn't have any great attributes except the ability to fight.
He doesn't have a lot of gaps either, though.
He doesn't have a lot of gaps either.
Right.
And so Eric's like, all right, man, go out here and like fight here, fight. Like it's so Sean's style hasn't changed, but his positioning of where to be at has.
Sean Strickland is like a creative fighter on UFC 4 that you start and then just like use the default option for it. You just like you just start and then you hit save and exit and his name is like default fighter. Yeah. And he's just like bald and has no facial hair and is a white guy and he's from like parts unknown and he has like a 50 in every stat. Instead of having a 99 in any other stat, he has like a 50 or a 60 all across the board.
His like dog meter is at 100.
Yes, the dog meter is at 100, but not. I mean, it's weird because his dog meter is at 100, but only in the gym.
Yeah. He
knocks guys out in the gym. He's killing motherfuckers in the gym, but he's not doing it on fight night.
Man, and as someone who has fought but doesn't call himself a fighter, it's easy to be a dog.
There's a lot of gym animals out there, aren't there?
Gym animals. Yeah. And a lot of people aren't animals in the gym that can turn up in a fight.
That's right.
So it's really easy to go ahead and try to swing on someone that's not the same training partner that you are. Like, if you put him in there with some other dog-ass motherfuckers...
You could be in it.
Like, so why does Sean gym hop? Because he will run into some other dog-ass motherfuckers that might not have a name fighting.
Orlando Sanchez.
All right, but look at this, man. You like every gym that has high-class fighters. Like, if you go to Extreme Couture, there's a guy in there you've never heard of.
Yeah.
But he can put on gloves and put the boots to Sean Strickland, and that's why he's there. You know, but like Eric is like someone that can work with Sean and help him, where Sean's gone to other gyms. I think had the boots put to him by guys that he's like
trying to break him.
Yeah, and he gets pissed off about that. Where like I think coaches like bring in like other dogs to bite him. Like
right.
That is something that people do. Like, oh, you want to bite these guys? I'll bring in a motherfucker, and it's their buddy who doesn't fight anymore. He's like, you're going to put these gloves on. And
shows up kind of like drunk with a Heineken on his breath.
Exactly. And Sean, I think, just like, and that's when he'll leave a gym.
The guy
we
from...
saw like the Orlando thing from like Ruka or wherever he was at. Like
Ultimate Fighter, George St. Pierre called in that Muay Thai guy who was drunk and just beat the shit out of everybody. And they were just like...
So Sean, I think, he got to that place with like Eric wasn't trying to bring people in to beat him up. He was like Sean is... a dog that just needs to get kind of like pet the right way. Eric's not like petting him; he's just kind of letting him walk on his own leash a bit. Like he's telling him what to do, and I don't think he's trying to bring people in to beat Sean up. Other people in that gym at Extreme Couture, like what I like when you hear from Sean's teammates, they all say, "Yeah, he's trying to tear my head off," and we're just like, "Okay, and what?" And I think that's good for him. Like, there's that recent video where he knocked the guy out that was not at Extreme Couture.
Yeah.
So I think at Extreme Couture,
sparring somewhere else.
He's at a place where he's just like, it's a bunch of people like that hold their own with him, and they're just like, yeah, go to town, whatever.
Yeah, he spars.
And like, it's like they've all seen it.
Reyes a lot.
Yeah.
He spars Reyes.
Like, I think everyone at that gym is like, they're like, okay, we're in Las Vegas. Like, we're that big gym here. Like, we've seen it, bro.
We are the big gym.
Like, yeah.
They are the big gym.
Like, if you go into that gym, like, Sean Strickland is someone, if you see him in a regular training practice, there's people running laps around him.
Yeah.
But come fight time, he has that thing that can put him in that fifth round better than someone else. And there is just that, like John Donner says it, guess what, kids, you ain't special. And they mean that to, like, every, like, one out of every couple million. And
right.
Sean is, like, someone that is not great at stuff, but he has that thing that a lot of talented high-level guys don't have, which is that they can be that motherfucker in that fifth round.
On fight night. On fight night. Not in the gym. Yeah, on fight night.
Like, can he kill someone in the gym? Yeah, cool. More importantly, in a fight, he's going to go out there and fight.
Like a pro.
Like, yeah. And that is something you can't teach. And Sean's had that since birth. And yeah. So, Sean, I think he's an interesting mix in the title. They can still lose a great fight. But, man, is he what I think of this month?
I think so, too. It takes more than an educated jab to beat Israel, and that's definitely all Sean is in my eyes so far. That's all he's shown us, is that he has a very educated jab.
Sean needs to fight someone like that.
Yeah, maybe. Friend of the show, Diego Lima, announced his retirement.
No.
Yes.
Really? Wow.
He took that fight against the Polish cat, and then he was like 2 weeks later, he's like, I'm done. I just don't want to do it. He said that his wife told him that she prayed heavily about it and that God spoke to her and that God said that Diego's last fight is his last fight. And he came out and said...
Recently, like, usually Brazilians just like pray and they move to Fusion XL.
That's what happens.
My wife told me we have to move to
Fusion XL. God has spoken.
God has spoken, yeah.
Boa.
True story, that is why a majority of the Brazilians have gone there, is because of this pastor from Brazil that moved to Orlando. And a lot of those dudes, like that, like when I was in Orlando, like that's what I heard. They all moved there because of some like pastor from Brazil moved to Orlando, and like Renato and all those guys were like obsessed with it. They moved there because of that guy.
We'll probably see him next weekend.
Really?
Yeah, we saw him at the last one, last next level that we went to.
Oh wait, I said Renato, and I was like, what?
Oh no, I'm talking about Lima, bro. It was both of them.
Like, they're gents crushing.
Yeah,
I think like that is good for him. Like he did the damn thing in Bellator.
Yeah.
he has nothing else to prove, I think.
So yeah, next week's episode we'll be talking a little bit about a fight card that we've got coming up next week for commentary. Next Level Fight Club. Should be some good matchups. We're gonna go over it with you guys next week. So that's a little preview of things to come. I know there's 2 title fights.
Roland Mizell on the undercard.
Joshua Oxendine, the Oxman himself.
Andrews is the main event.
So yeah, there's a lot to talk about with that card next week, and I think there might be a fight night next week. But guys.
There's fights like every week in this.
Yeah, finally. I think that time, the 3-week span in like December, January, where there were no fights, I think it just felt like years. So now I'm just worried fights will go away again. Like even if the UFC is putting on like a super shitty card on a Saturday, and I got nothing going on, I'm probably watching that shit. and honestly, if it's a super shitty fight night card and I got something going on Saturday, I'll probably watch it Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Like, I usually watch them all.
I enjoy catching these random fights on Fightcast.
Because they're just good. Sometimes they're just good. And the matchmaking in the UFC has improved so much in the past, 5 years.
You'll probably hear us, talking about some of these, random fight cards we catch, man, because there's some great scraps going on that just people should hear about.
Correct. Yeah. And that's what we're here for. So, we thank you guys so much for tuning in to the first episode of the 10-8 Fightcast. We're probably going to have this available everywhere that podcasts are available. I'm going to use a podcast distributor to make sure that happens. So you guys can watch it on YouTube. You can listen to it in the car. You can, you'll be able to access the show anywhere. Shout outs to Alex Pokey from Badge of Honor, who's going to be helping us with some of the arts and other stuff to do with the podcast. But for now, it's just 2 guys talking about fighting, keeping it simple.